upcoming implementation of an updated solid waste implementation plan. The solid waste implementation plan, or a SWIP, helps Vermont communities meet the goals of Vermont's material management plan and Act 148, which is the state's recycling and composting law. To meet these requirements, CSWD develops a 5-year solid waste implementation plan that puts state and district priorities into action. The plan focuses on reducing waste, promoting reuse and recycling, expanding composting, ensuring safe hazardous waste disposal, and educating residents, businesses, and institutions about responsible waste management. And public input is vital, and that's the purpose of tonight's hearing, which is the first of two. We have tonight's hearing, and we also have a hearing on October 22nd. And ultimately, the solid waste implementation plan will be presented to the board for approval at its
recording in progress.
Remind members of the public that they can make verbal comments while they're present at one of these meetings, either present in person or via Zoom. We also will accept written commentary, which should be directed to the executive director, Sarah Reeves. With that preamble and an explanation of why we're holding this public hearing, are there any members of the public who wish to address the Board of Commissioners concerning the 2025 solid waste implementation plan? And note for the record, there are no members of the public present in our meeting room.
There's anybody online either.
Can we just hit the participants?
Yeah, there is no members of the public online.
No members of the public.
No members of the public are present. I'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we close the public hearing. Essex.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, South Burlington.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we close the public hearing on the solid waste implementation plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? We will now close the public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to the second meeting that has been properly warned. We do have a quorum present to the Board of Commissioners. And this is our regular September meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. The time is approximately 6:02 p.m. And as I noted, we do have a quorum present. First item on the agenda is the agenda itself. Are there any requests for changes or additions to the agenda?
Actually, Paul, we had discussed removing the quasi-judicial process review from executive session and moving that into public session.
Correct. Still hold that. So item 8E-C, the quasi-judicial process review will be held in public session, not in executive session. And since we are anticipating a long meeting tonight, I would like to insert a brief 5-minute break after item 6, the diversion report, and before item 7, the materials recovery facility project update. I think we'd all appreciate it. A brief break to stand up and move around. I'll watch the clock and introduce that at that time. Hearing no other requests for changes or additions to the agenda, we will follow it as presented in the board packet. Second item on the agenda is the public comment period. And I'll again invite any members of the public present either in person or via Zoom or the telephone who wish to address the board. But this is your opportunity to speak up.
There's still no members of the public present online.
And I'll note there are no members of the public present in the meeting room. I will close the public comment period and move on to item number 3, which is new board member introduction. We have 2 new members that I'm very happy to excited to welcome to the board. That is Betsy Perret from Milton and David Howell from Williston. Glad to have you here. You're new. We're going to just so that you kind of get a feel for all the people around this room and also via Zoom. I'm going to ask first commissioners to introduce yourselves by name and your town, and then I'll reserve the last 2 for you that you could just introduce yourselves. And if you have anything you'd like to share about yourself, that would be wonderful. But maybe I'll start. I'm Paul Roos. I'm the chair, but also the representative from the town of Underhill. And we will move, I guess, to my left.
Paul Stabler, and I represent the city of South Burlington.
And let's do that.
And he's the treasurer.
And you're the treasurer.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So we'll just keep going around and have staff jump in as well.
John Balfardo, the Director of Finance.
I'm Jen Holiday, Director of Public Policy and Communications.
Rick McCraw, Director representing the booming metropolis of Heinsberg.
We'll let you go later, Betsy, but go ahead.
Lauren Egan, Colchester.
Lee Perry, City of Burlington representative. The board since 2019, I believe.
Alan I, Essex, I'm vice chair, and people will say I've been on board too long.
I'm Thomas Maloney, and not a commissioner, but I am legal counsel to the Solid Waste District.
Sarah Reeves, I'm the executive director of SWIP.
And then we'll go on to Zoom, the way you are on the screen that I can see. We'll start with Ken.
Hey, I'm Ken Spencer, represent Charlotte, and I'm on the executive board.
Marty?
I'm Margie Weiner. I represent Shelburne, and I guess I've been on for about 2 years.
Barb?
So welcome new members. I'm the representative from Huntington.
Tom?
I'm Tom Jocelyn, alternate from Jericho, and our commissioner is from Jericho is Leslie Nolte, who's not present tonight.
Wendy?
I am Wendy. I'm the alternate for Essex.
And then we'll go to our one staff member, John Dorwart.
Yes, Director of IT.
So Betsy, I'll just, you can introduce yourself. We know who you are, but you're from Milton.
Yes, hi, Betsy Perret. I'm from Milton. I moved to Vermont in 2015 from Washington, DC, but I still worked in Washington, DC for 9 years. So I was commuting every week, flying back and forth. So I retired in December 2024, and I was appointed to Milton's Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, and Conservation Commission. So I am very busy now. I learned to play pickleball, and so I'm really excited. We don't have trash pickup where I am. We're very rural. We have 176 acres. And so I go to either Milton or Essex every week, sometimes twice a week. And so I really am committed to kind of how we handle trash and recycling and composting. And with my mom, I took a tour of the Clinton County, New York landfill, which was very interesting and exciting. And Sarah encouraged me to visit the Covington landfill, Coventry landfill at some point. So I'm doing the tour tomorrow. So I'm really excited to be here and look forward to working with all of you.
And you probably, with all that commuting, still have a lot of frequent flyer miles to use that?
It's a few, yes. It's a short trip though, you don't earn a lot.
Dave. Hi, so I'm Dave Howell from Williston. I moved to Vermont in 2010. Before that, I lived in Illinois and grew up in Indiana. I'll say that because the first time I went to the drop-off site for CSWD and compared and contrasted that with my experience in rural Indiana, it was a real eye-opener to see like such an organized, clean facility that where conservation is taken very seriously. It maybe sounds strange to say that like I've really enjoyed, one of the things I really enjoyed about living in Vermont is the chance to go to the drop-off site. I love it every time. So I am very happy to be able to be here and be more a part of that mission to SWD now.
Great. Well, I guess, welcome. Thank you very much for those introductions, and we'll do our best to get you up to speed. And a reminder that when we talk acronyms, we'll try to slow down and spell them out because they can come fast and furious.
Very true.
We'll now move on to item number 4, which is the consent agenda consisting of the minutes of our July 30th, 2025 and August 11th, 2025 meetings, program update memos, executive director update, and the finance report consisting of fund balances, reserves, and warrants. Is there any request to remove any of those items from the consent agenda? Hearing none, those items will be accepted as presented in the board packet. And we are now ready to move on to item number 5, which is the fiscal year 25 year-end financials. I know that John's going to be doing most of the presentation. I don't know if you have any introductory comments, Sarah, or just we'll turn it right over to
I'm
John.
gonna turn right over to John. I don't want to take any time away from his presentation. Got a lot of good information.
All right.
Are you going to be sharing your screen at all, or do you need to, do you think?
I wasn't going to
Okay.
because the packet's out unless somebody suggests that's a good idea. So I was just gonna talk a little bit about the overall results. And then just open it up for questions. There's a lot of information here. I don't feel like we have enough time, or nor is anyone interested in having me just recite all of this. So, 2025 was overall a good year for the district. We exceeded last year's income by almost $4 million. Exceeded the budget by almost $3 million. We also did pretty well on expenses, which we'll talk about in detail in a little bit. But there's a couple of notable items worth talking about. We received a $1.5 million grant from the state of Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation related to the MRF project that was directly related to the piece of property that we bought. We had a $375,000 gain on the sale of the property on Flynn Avenue. We had a $151,000 positive net operating income out of the ORF. In fiscal 24, it was a negative 172.
ORF
I'm
represents.
sorry. It's the and it shows up with different names depending on what you're looking at. It's the Organics Recycling Facility. It shows up as ODF.
That's old.
But it's still, you still see it.
Green Mountain Compost.
And Green Mountain Compost is the other one.
That's the problem.
I
just want to congratulate staff on that. That's a great accomplishment. That's something we've been trying to get to happen for, God, since we first got bought it from the Intervale Center. So, yeah, just
And it's
kudos.
worth
Great.
noting, they also had the drag of the Garden Supply bankruptcy, about $74,000.
Anyway,
Revenue that's sort of evaporated.
sorry for that.
No, thank you.
No worries. And we should note that's operating income. What happens below operating income is then some depreciation. And so if we look at the total books, they're not making enough to overcome depreciation. They're pretty heavy, capital heavy operation. The same thing for the DOCs. They had $93,000 of positive net operating income.
Drop-off centers.
Sorry, drop-off centers. Thank you. When in 2020, fiscal 24 was $88,000 negative. So some pretty big swings to the positive. And I talk about the drivers in net income a little, or income a little later in the document, but basically we saw an increase in volumes and rates. The next section's worth talking about. It's a little bit of a new presentation talking about net position. This is effectively the equity of the district. This is where done some work in that little memo that was earlier in the agenda, trying to relate fund balances to cash, to reserves, and then talk a little bit about how the warrants and accounts receivable and all of that come together. So what we see here on table 2, fund balances.
What page is that in the?
34.
34.
Thank you. Yeah, it gets a little confusing because the document itself has page numbers, which are different than the overall.
This is page 34 on the PDF.
Page 34 on the PDF, table 2. It's entitled the calculation of total reserves. And there's a header, cash reserves, and you'll see a bunch of things listed there: the solid waste management fund, operating fund, capital fund, MRF project capital fund, so on. In the memo that was in the consent agenda, it explains a little bit about what the purpose of those funds are, what the value of the funds might be. Some of them are subject to what we've called a waterfall, and some of them are a hard calculation. Sometimes not so hard, a bit of an estimate, but what this table represents is those funds at their required or stated balances, and the cash assigned to it. So a fund really is a claim on equity, and for us, what that really means is a claim on cash. You'll note that we have $12,721,000 in fund balances, but $11,067,000 in cash. Well, how do those two relate? So in this presentation, I've allocated cash against every fund except the capital fund, which we are not putting any more money towards while we're working on the MRF, the Materials Recycling Facility Project Capital Fund. And when we do that, we can fund the funds 100% and still have something left over. That leftover is $892,000. That's what I'm calling the first piece of our reserves. But note that we do have 3 months of administrative budgeted expenses in the Solid Waste Management Fund and 3 months of budgeted operating expenses in the operating fund. So as we continue down this document, then we get into working capital. Working capital is the cash we can expect to generate in the very short term through the operation of the business. And the easy one to, in my mind, an easy one to talk about is accounts receivable. Those are billings that we're going to collect. And you'll see a little further down, we get into our accounts receivable on page 35, table 4, shows you that it's almost 100% within 30 days outstanding. So we do a very good job with chasing down payments, collecting cash. So when we see a number that says accounts receivable balance is $2,479,451, I'm back on page 34 now. That 2.5 million, we're likely to collect that within the next 30 days of the date of this document, which was June. So very liquid. We put against that the payables, the liabilities that are current. When we calculate that out, there's another $1 million of excess. So add that to the 892 excess cash reserves. We have something I've called total reserves of $937,550. Well, we see a number. How do you evaluate that number? It made sense to me to go figure out what our monthly average cash burn is. How much cash are we consuming in the business on average for a month? You'll see there's a bit of a calculation on page 35, table 3. I'm basically listing out all the warrants which the Board of Commissioners sees every week when we cut checks. Anyway, and I'm subtracting out the MRF related expenses from those amounts. And we have an average, a monthly average for the quarter ended June 30 of $1,293,000. So when I break that out, our total reserves of $1,009,000 compared to the $1,003,000 average cash burn, we have 4.3 months of operating cash on hand. That seems like a pretty robust reserve, besides providing cash for all of the other funds that we talked about up above. And some of them are restricted funds, like the debt service fund is restricted, now solids fund, and the landfill post-closure fund. So the district is in very strong financial position with adequate reserves, and we're making good progress towards funding the MRF project capital. The rest of it, we get into some pretty pictures on page 36. There's some graphs talking about income. In my mind, those were the big items to cover. I would open it up to the board for questions, unless somebody wants me to talk a little bit more about some of the other sections.
Before we do that, I just want to point out that this was reviewed in detail by the finance committee meeting now 2 weeks ago. And we did go through
almost all of it
in detail. And that's the function of the finance committee, to delegate that responsibility for the full board down to the finance committee to dig into the weeds on this a little bit more.
And I did make some edits. There were some almost jargony things in here that I thought made sense, but no one else understood. So we made some changes.
So now we'll open up for questions and comments. Ken, your hand is up.
Hey, I have a question and a comment. John, my question is just trying to picture this in real life, this allocated cash, does that mean it's cash or is it in money that's invested or what does that mean?
So they're kind of one and the same for us. We have cash in an operating account that has an overnight sweep. We have cash in the money market fund, and we have cash in some bonds, treasury bonds. But all of them are liquid. We can liquidate the treasury bonds in 3 business days if we needed that money. We can get the money market cash in a day, and the rest of it is sitting there in an operating account. So basically, this is cash and cash equivalents. This is very liquid cash that we can get our hands on. So on page 34, table 2, total cash and cash equivalents, that's $11,067,900. We can have that in our hands in roughly 3 business days.
Terrific. And my comment is just thank you. I've always wondered about these reserve funds. I've never understood it the way I kind of feel like I do right now. And that little table with the monthly cash burn was just fantastic. I really appreciate you for putting this together. It's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would there's further explanation of that in that little memo that we'll be issuing every month. It's in the consent agenda, talking about the funds and defining them a little bit. But thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate you.
Paul Stabler.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to congratulate John and his staff. I've been around a while, and I can say that this report is so much better than what we used to have, say, 15, 20 years ago, which was all spreadsheet based. And it worked at the time, but I feel like this is much, clarifies things much better and helps us see at a glance, in many cases, where our financial position is. The other last thing I'll just mention is we did hold a meeting of the investment committee too, and basically we reaffirmed in terms of the strategy for investing in treasuries. The board had, I think, delegated that decision-making and authority to Sarah and John, to staff. And so they're going to continue that kind of process. So that's it.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot because at the finance committee, you asked what I thought was an excellent question. And if you can recall it, I think the whole board would benefit from you asking the question, giving John the chance to.
Sure. Yeah. First, I just want to echo what you all said. I'm new to the finance committee, and part of the reason I joined is that I want to learn more about finance, and it's always been very difficult for me. And like Ken said, this report made it so much easier. Learned it a lot of different times, but this time it actually made sense. And I also want to highlight the investment piece that Paul was saying. John took the initiative to move our cash around to be in the most advantageous places. And it just takes a lot of knowledge and ability to be able to do that. And I think it also limits our risk. So getting to my question for John in the finance committee was, we were also in context talking about how when we receive kind of the goods that we receive, so like recycling and trash, that it moves through our processes quite quickly. And so that's like an advantage. It's pretty regular. There's not like seasonality so much to our work. So one of the things that I wanted to ask John was, I saw a lot of benefits in kind of like our finances and the way that they run, but what are some of the risks in the nature of our work, and specifically what is the biggest risk?
Sure. So one of the risks is just the macro economic environment. Should folks stop buying stuff, we would have fewer materials coming in. Our opportunity to generate revenue would be less. But it's kind of a funny business and then, but a lot of her costs would also go down. So there's a kind of a balancing act. But I see that as a risk. Another risk that I think of is something that we're not expecting about, some kind of technological change that somehow renders recycling, obsolete or any of the things we're doing. And I can't imagine what that would be, but that's the nature of some of the technology that comes up. And then the other risk that I see is with the timing of construction of the new MRF. I don't know if we've shared some of the projections I was doing on operating cash flows of the MRF. And the question was, how long does it take us to build this thing? How longer it takes, the higher the costs go. I see that as the risk that's out there. To mitigate that risk, we should get that thing built as quickly and as efficiently as we possibly can. And there's still some unknowns about timing and some of the costs, but I think we're kind of narrowing in on what those might be. So the MRF is the big risk that I see.
Another risk that is just inherent in our business is our business. We, solid waste business consistently ranks in the top 5 to 7 most dangerous industries in the country. So that, that is an inherent risk to what we do, which is why we focus so strongly on safety. We do trainings multiple times a year. Once a year, we close all of our facilities and we all gather together for a day-long training. So that one just, again, we're handling big drums of things. We are, a lot of moving pieces. We have loaders, we have lots of heavy equipment, anything, and lots of people coming in and out of our facilities. So that piece as well is one of our big people risks that we do a very good job. And yet, we are in that high risk industry. Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Al.
The one thing that, I've always laughed at is that we're in the business of putting ourselves out of business.
Yes.
And, if we could have all of the recycling and all of the organics taken out of the trash, the amount of stuff we're going to be taking to Coventry and making our money on is headed downhill. And we see that in the monthly amounts of solid waste that gets to go to Coventry. So it's a very interesting effort that we go through.
That's right. And there was a study done recently in Canada, but that talked about the perception of recycling as the most important thing you can do. However, there are a few more R's before recycling, and we really do want to continue to promote those R's, reuse and reduce, and all the other R's ahead of recycle towards that end of putting ourselves out of business.
Mark.
So
Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
I have a newbie question, which is the capital allocation fund. Is that where, like, if there's some of the heavy equipment at any of the facilities needs to be replaced, is that what that would come out of?
Yeah, so you're talking about the general one, not the MRF?
Yeah, the general capital allocation.
So the number that's sitting there it really represents what was in the capital expenditures budget for prior year now. And yeah, so we've got an estimate of, the equipment that we're gonna need to replace, what those costs might be. I can get them all up and we can come up with that number. The consensus was to not fund that reference towards the MRF capital fund because it looked like we the day Sarah and I were talking a little about this today, the day we have some kind of emergency where a piece of equipment breaks down, well, there's plenty of cash to cover that, right? Basically just take a little money out of that MRF project fund to take care of that. Assuming it's a critical piece of equipment, we can't operate without. Otherwise, until we get this thing built, we're kind of delaying CapEx as much as we can.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, is just what happens if there's a need to replace something urgently. And yeah, it comes out of the MRF fund.
And yeah, I think a lot of the capital money, it was old MRF parts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was. And, you know, we've done a good job over the past few years of making sure that our routine capital replacement list is current. Because we had kind of let things get quite old, and then we're spending more money on repairs or leases or having an emergency situation. So what we've done is, when I made the decision to not fund the capital fund for this current year, talk with our director of operations, our director of organics recycling, and director of drop-off centers, and said, tell me what your critical needs are, because that's all that we're going to be looking at for next year. So they know that this year and next year, it's going to run into next year for the recycling facility. They do need to pay even more particular attention to maintenance and to making sure that, as much as they can, again, this industry is a hard-wearing industry, that what we have now is going to do the job. We are fortunate to be in an area where there are pretty decent rental opportunities for some of our more commonly needed pieces of equipment, like you know, a skid steer or a forklift for sure. So those kinds of things we wouldn't rush right out and buy. But so hopefully, you know, our screener's not going to need to be replaced, or things of that nature that are kind of those critical components. Those are also newer pieces of equipment. So we made sure as well that we got the extended warranty with some of those things. So kind of planning ahead for those needs to make sure that we're maximizing the investment that we made in these high dollar amount pieces of equipment. So that dash, that zero, is short term. We will then go back to funding, obviously, the capital fund as well. After in year fiscal 28, we're budgeting now for next year. And as John was saying, most of these funds are, you can move between them if you need to. There are a couple that are called restricted. Those, it's only for this topic. So a landfill post-closure fund can only be used for the care of the closed landfill. Biosolids is just for the members who pay into that fund. They're the only ones who can access it. So those are the ones that we don't touch. The others, as needed, we can move things around.
I guess I'd also point out that these are numbers that you presented through June 30th.
Correct.
And as the board will remember, the solid waste management fee was increased as of July 1st, significant increase in the solid waste management fee. So these numbers do not reflect that increase in the solid waste management fee. And then talking about capital needs, it's also a point to be made that the additional revenue coming in from the solid waste management fee, which is essentially a fee per ton on anything that's generated in Chittenden County that is deposited in Coventry. It's one of the major sources of revenue for the district. But that increased revenue will be directed towards the new MRF to address those challenges.
Correct. There's a delta of $10 a ton. So the first $30 is dedicated to our operations, our ongoing operations, and then that extra 10 is being dedicated to the materials recycling facility project capital fund. So we're not shortchanging our ongoing needs, our daily needs. It is that extra bit that we're looking towards supplementing the MRF.
Thank you for the clarification.
No.
Other discussion, questions about the year-end FY25 year-end financials? Really appreciate the clear message that you're giving to us and great numbers. I think it's important. The responsibility of the board is oversight, making sure that we're on the right track. And we certainly trust our staff.
But verify.
Trust but verify, but this is what this board should be all about, I think. Thank you very much. We're moving ahead at a great pace here, so we can move on to diversion. I guess, you know, we talked about putting ourselves out of business. If I recall, I think you'll point out that we're doing a good job, but maybe we're not going to go out of business quite so soon. There's some opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, well, I also want to sort of, I want to say thanks to John for his, you know, happy tale of our financial well-being, and hopefully I can give you some information about how we are performing in our goal to divert material successfully from the landfill. And that too, I think, is actually a pretty good story It's a slow moving target, but over the years, I hope I can demonstrate, at least in this presentation report, we've made a substantial amount of progress. Let me just share my screen here. Oh, can everybody see this now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So we have been putting together our diversion report for almost 30 years now. And let me slide. There we go. The purpose of our diversion report is to provide you with an overview of the metrics that we use to evaluate our programs and to review how we compare to last year, and I try and give about 10 years of comparable data in our annual report. Also, I just wanted to note that the state puts together their own diversion report that's worth taking a look at, and a few of the other solid waste management entities do as well. So if you want to get some idea of how we compare statewide, they have a report available on their website as well, which is fairly interesting. We focus on 4 principal metrics in this report: the diversion rate, the disposal rate, recovery rate, and our environmental impacts as quantified in GHG emissions, greenhouse gas, that is. We first adopted our diversion rate in 1993, so it's been over 30 years now. And that is essentially an expression of how much material we have diverted over the material we've generated within our county. So it's waste diverted from the landfill over everything we generated, which is diverted or disposed at Coventry. We later added the disposal rate, which is a per capita per day disposed. This is in response to the Agency of Natural Resources in Vermont adopting this measure. So we had something that was comparable to their goals and assessments of progress in diverting waste. We also look at the recovery rate, which we essentially it's measuring the percent of targeted, meaning materials that we specifically have programs for to divert from the landfill. So that would be single stream recycling and organics, principally. And then the final index is the greenhouse gas emissions. We use the EPA's WARM model to arrive at that. And that just sort of gives an idea of, at least in terms of climate change, what kind of impacts our diversion activities has in the course of a year. So for 2024, highlights, we generated about 4.3% more solid waste than we did in 2023. Now, this is a long-standing trend, essentially as a function of population growth. Our tons disposed, however, of MSW, which is municipal solid waste. For those of you who are new to the board, municipal solid waste is materials that are generated by residential and commercial activities in the county. So essentially trash. And our diversion actually increased by almost 14% year over year. And we'll look later more at the trends, but our disposal has been slowly decreasing and our diversion has been slowly increasing over the year. So we've been meeting the stated goals of our mission fairly effectively, though it's a slow process. So you have to kind of be patient in this exercise. Construction and demolition tons remain at historical highs. In terms of generation, we diverted slightly more in 2023. Our diversion rate for MSW, which is sort of the one index we kind of hang our hat on, remains high, almost 55%, and increased year over year 3.5% from last. And then our recovery rate for mandatory recyclables also rebounded a bit from 2023. We had a dip last year, some of you might remember. Just the facts of the matter, you can see we had an increase in MSW disposed, quite a few tons of disposed material from Chittenden County, 86,000 tons over the course of a year, or 83,000 this year. The amount diverted, of course, is actually a little bit higher, 100,000 tons, and we had a reasonably quite a large increase from the year prior. To get at some of what's driving these changes, we had an increase in food residuals and yard waste from last year, fairly substantial increase in glass recycled, and really quite a large increase in textiles, although that didn't have an exceptional impact on the overall diversion rate. It was just something I wanted to know. We also revised our methodology, well, once again, for backyard composting. I mentioned this last year. The state had put together a new methodology for estimated backyard composting in the state. We'd been relying on a number from the EPA that was several years old. Came to the conclusion that it was probably a little optimistic. The estimate from the state was quite conservative. We went out this spring and surveyed our residents and asked, one of the questions we asked was whether folks participate in backyard composting or otherwise managing their organics. And so based on the results from that survey and the states, we were able to revise our estimates. And so that kind of moderated the drop that I saw or had estimated last year. Also, tire recycling has increased. This is really a matter of better reporting. We had a facility that were a company that was providing tire pickup services in the county, and it turns out they had been reporting a much higher proportion of disposals than actually was happening. They were recycling more of the material and the products like for sports fields and other products. So that also was a notable change from the year prior. So these are just, did I go the wrong way? There we go. We also saw a fairly large increase in clean wood and yard waste, and also a kind of change of roles. McNeil Generating Station took in about 37% of our clean wood for the county, and our ODF is taking in a substantial amount more. This is almost a reversal of years prior, and they're seeing a much larger volume of material coming to the ODF. And some of the reasons for that possibly is change in traffic patterns we've had in the last year. Could also be related to the ash borer, and maybe just some weather events may have also influenced those numbers. We also, when we record our numbers for wood waste, we base them off of material that's been ground and then weighed in at our facility. And because of the nature of how we store and grind the material, there's sometimes lags over calendar years. So I may be capturing a little bit of material that was actually from the prior year in the numbers we collected. But at any rate, general uptake in diversion overall. Our diversion rate, which is calculated, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of material diverted over generation, has increased substantially from the year before. And I just threw in the number for 1993, which was 31%, to show that, over the course of now 30 years, we've made substantial progress. Just to give some context, unfortunately, it's hard to get, or you can't get a general US number any earlier than 2018, but we're substantially ahead of what that diversion rate figure was as calculated by the EPA in 2018. We're a bit higher than the state, and we would fall in the class of what's generally considered as the best performing cities in the nation. One thing that was of note, I think I might have mentioned this last year, and I'll mention it again. I ran across a report that the solid waste, if we get the acronym wrong, it's SWANA, it's the Solid Waste Association of North America, if I'm correct. They have an applied research foundation, and they showed in a paper a couple of years ago that diversion rates have actually been flat in the best performing cities for a few years. And they pointed to a couple of challenges we've seen. One of them was a major challenge in improving the diversion practices of multiple family residential housing, and also improving the diversion of organics. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to kind of give some context to the challenges we face, that we're definitely not alone. Okay, so the maximum diversion rate, this is sort of an ideal, and the way we come to the calculating our ideal rate of diversion is to add up the tons that we do actually divert, plus the tons that we know are disposed but are currently divertible. So there are studies out in the state, and we have also conducted within our own county, that are essentially waste sorts. And what that is a team of people will go out to the various transfer stations over a period of time. They'll take samples of the materials being tipped at those facilities and essentially weigh out what's ending up at the transfer stations and destined to Coventry. And an appreciable amount of that material, unfortunately, does turn out to be organics and other recyclables that we're hoping to divert and turn into a commodity that has a value in and of itself. So in a way, it's not so much putting ourselves out of business, I think, is diverting the material from Coventry, where yes, they would generate a solid waste management fee, but to divert them to secondary markets where they can also generate value as materials to be utilized for commercial processes or soil amendments and such. And then lastly, for our favorite indicators, just GHG emissions. If you were to take everything that we divert and utilize the EPA's WARM model for this and express that as how many CO2 or metric tons of CO2 equivalent that are reduced, it would be the equivalent of taking about 32,000 cars off the road for the last year. Okay, so turning the page to C and D, this is considered separate from municipal solid waste trash. This is material that's generated from ongoing construction, whether it be housing, commercial, office, or road construction. It's a large amount of material is generated, a large amount is disposed. Apparently, a large amount is diverted. And I have to give the caveat that the diversion rate for C&D is largely influenced by what we would refer to as ABCs, that's asphalt, brick, and concrete. So very dense, massive material generally involved with the construction of roads influences what we would what we calculate as a diversion rate for construction materials. It's hard to then see how shingles, how the recycling of gypsum and other construction really clean wood, for instance, is influenced that number, because it's a relatively small portion. And to that end, what I can tell you is that we had a number of facilities in operation several years back. We know from our experience with shingles that the markets have been hard to find for those materials. And so we've seen a market dip in the recycling, certainly in shingles, but also in clean wood and in gypsum board. So there's been a somewhat downward trend over the last 4 or 5 years for those few materials that we know we can recycle potentially, but just because of the difficulty in finding markets and having the ready facilities to handle them, that's been a challenge. So that's outlined here on this slide. We still have a large number of construction and demolition projects for the time being. I haven't had a chance to look, and I think it'll be interesting to see how many permits are being pulled in the near future and what might be in the pipeline, but we may see a dip depending on economic conditions in the next year or two in our C&D materials, both disposed and diverted, but that remains to be seen. So our diversion rate is pretty much in line with last year. The maximum diversion rate is not far away from where we are, and that's just, again, it's a function of the materials at hand and what we can handle as a community in terms of recycling. So it looks relatively good, but keep in mind a lot of that is heavy material that is, utilized in road construction and those sorts of things, and I think would normally be used as such. Oh. There we go. Oh, am I going backward? Sorry, I'm hitting the wrong keys here. All right. The last item of materials, or the last category of materials we keep an eye on, is alternative daily cover. And for those of you new to the organization, ADC is primarily earthen material, non-hazardous, although often contaminated, that's used on the active face of the landfill at the end of each operating day to control vectors and fires, odors, and those sorts of things. This is something that's approved for use by the Vermont ANR. It's also sort of a wild card, depending on how many projects we have active at any one time that's producing this contaminated soil. So it's something we report on, but not something that we directly add to our diversion rate, just because it tends to wildly vary over time. But I just report that here for completeness. Okay, so finally, looking for more of a historical perspective, this chart is just essentially looking at the trends of materials for MSW and CD, both diverted and disposed. You can see the regression lines. It's just to give you a sense of trends over a 10-year period. MSW, the red line, disposed, is just about 7,300 tons less than it was 10 years ago. That's despite a population increase of about 10,000 residents, an increase of around 3,300 business establishments, and 6,800 employees compared to 2014. We've had a sharper increase in disposal since 2020, likely due to what we've required from businesses in reporting sorry, I'm getting lost in my notes here. So yeah, we've seen an increase from 2020, both from the pandemic, and also we required businesses to report materials that they're both disposing or sending to direct markets and bypassing some of our facilities. The green line shows C&D diverted with a big jump in 2014 and 15, which I mentioned before. And that was when we had a few operating C&D recycling facilities in the county. Those ultimately closed, and we've seen sort of a tepid diversion of C&D materials. It's essentially a function of the construction industry. I'm just going to show these numbers in aggregate. This gives you, it's the same data, but it's essentially giving you an idea of the amount of material generated in the county. You can get the, you can see the trends of increased recycling for MSW, a decrease in disposal, and likewise for, well, you can see an increase both in recycling and disposal for C&D. Our disposal rates, and this is based off of a per cap per day of disposal again, MSW dropping over a 10-year period, and disposal of the C&D climbing ever so slightly. Our diversion rates, you can see a trend of steady increase for MSW per capita, and, or actually this is not per capita, it's our diversion rate in general. And for C&D, a slight decline over the last 10 years. As far as our recovery rates for mandatory recyclables, single stream or blue bin recyclables is up about 2% from last year. And when you combine that with organics, it's up about 3.5%. So that's That's some good
John,
news.
can I interrupt you for a second just to explain what
Sure.
the recovery rate is?
The recovery rate is the rate that we are able to recover materials for which we specifically have programs to divert from the landfill. So things like single stream, that, you know, in our ordinance, we banned from the landfill organics that we've banned from the landfill, and we have programs here at CSWD or elsewhere in the county to ensure their diversion from the landfill. So of all the material that is considered a single stream recyclable in this case, we know that about 80% of it is captured before it hits the landfill. The waste sort studies show us that we're still losing some material.
So another way to say it is, you know, we're looking at a blue bin here, 80% of the material in a blue bin is recovered and put to some sort of use, so that we might get, no?
No, so it's 80% of the material that is available in the general community. So what is out there.
What is
that
generated,
qualifies
correct.
as a blue bin material, our programs capture 80% of that.
And the rest, 20% goes to landfill. It never goes to the blue bin.
Gotcha, okay.
And I think this chart will also help kind of describe that. So this is essentially an interpolation of everything that has gone to the landfill and the proportion of material we think could have still been recovered, but was ultimately sent to Coventry. So again, there's a good chunk of that total 124,000 tons that was organics, special recyclables, textiles, those sorts of things. Blue bin recyclables are single stream recyclables, and recoverable C&D. So although we've shown great progress over the years, we still have challenges, which is I think well expressed by this chart. It's as much as 60,000 tons of material that still could have been recovered given the programs and facilities that we have in the county today. And given the moderate population growth that we've experienced over the last 10 years, if that trend continues, I don't think that there's no good reason to assume that this problem will present itself, year after year. To the degree that we can change our programs, we can offer better opportunities for recycling, that we can get better participation in our programs, we'll be able to put a dent in this. But it's sort of the ongoing struggle of the district. And as you could see from the charts earlier, and some of the figures I've given you, a 32% diversion rate in 1993, 54% today. It's a slow process, but we've been steadily gaining, and so I think that's something to celebrate. We're a little bit of a frustrated profession because it seems like we're always coming back and re-explaining, our methods and programs and our, inspiration to better recycle and capture organics in the county. And that's just something that we have to continue to strive for. So with that, I open it up to any questions that folks may have.
Well, first, thank you, John, for walking us through that, and for everybody involved in capturing all of these statistics. This is a numbers intensive business. It's not just taking a pile of material and putting it somewhere. There's a lot of data that's captured. What goes on behind the scenes. So thank you for the work that you do. Ken, your hand is up, and then Margie.
Hey, this is for John or the team as a whole. That notion, thank you, John, for pointing out that diversion doesn't necessarily mean no revenue. That's an alternative source, but it did make me think of glass, which we divert, but it seems to be a loser or a cost suck. Am I right? Is that the only thing that costs more to divert than we get out of diverting? Is glass the only bet, or is C&D also a costly thing to divert?
A good question. I mean, certainly glass still has it's a negative because it costs us more to make the PGA, the processed glass aggregate, than we can sell it for at the moment.
Right.
We do receive a tip fee for it though, so we do receive revenue on the inbound for that material. So there's some positive there. we don't receive revenue for textiles, for example. But it needs to be diverted, and we want to divert that because that's a large chunk of the material that is currently being landfilled that does have a market. Jim, what would you say would be the next material that is?
Most of the materials that we divert, so we have the extended producer responsibility programs where the companies pay for diversion of paint, electronics, fluorescent bulbs. And then the next tier is user fees, which is like tires, mattresses. Sometimes we've subsidized a little bit of those materials off and on, depending on, the vendors' changes of prices, and we don't integrate a change right away. I can't think of anything, like when you do the math on glass, the tip fee after you pay the processing fee and you transport the glass, you are at a negative net.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, for that one, I mean, we are still actively working with UVM and ANR on our septic mound replacement project. We are going to be doing some pilot projects through ANR over the next year to prove that process and that product. And VTrans still does have some interest in using some of their that material as well. So the goal is to continue to produce that processed glass aggregate, and then to be able to sell that at least at a break even. Go ahead, Jen.
Hazardous waste.
Hazardous waste is always going to be a cost center for us, but the board has generously over the years supported that subsidy for all the good reasons that you do. We do have the first in the nation extended producer responsibility law for household hazardous waste that is still kind of making it is in law, but the negotiations as far as how that's going to run are still ongoing. But that is a very costly program. And as far as the blue bin materials, PET, so your soda bottles, water bottles, the price per pound is pretty low at the moment. Aluminum and steel are still pretty good. The natural HDPE, which is your milk jugs, is still okay. That tends to rise and fall with construction and housing starts. So as the construction market goes, so goes the price for recycled HDPE. Cardboard is still holding its own, which is the good news, because 73.45% of what we process through our materials recycling facility are fiber products, cardboard and paper. So we really strive to have a very clean stream of that product. And then when the new MRF is built, that will help ensure the very high quality of all of the streams. And while we may not recover more money for that, we will always be able to move the product to market. And that is critical, particularly here in a northern climate, in a rural climate, where we don't have great roads to a lot of places that have manufacturing. Having that high quality material will help us be able to continue to move that out. So it is a balance. But yeah, that really glass until we kind of get that approval from ANR for either or, kind of both would be great. Uses of that PGA, it will continue to be a cost center. I do want to make a note too on the question about the ORF processing more clean wood. We expanded our acceptance of leaf and yard debris to include more of the larger pieces of branches and things like that. So because once we got that big shredder, we were able to process more of that. So we actively, accepted more material in. So that's why that increase in the process of the material at the ORF is not a surprise.
Yeah, thanks for the detailed answer. I was just looking at this pie chart thinking, if we do a much better job at some of these things, we're going to be better off or worse off. But maybe now with that ORF being able to be positive cash flow. That 25% green pie looks pretty appealing. Right?
Absolutely, and that is, we look at this pie chart and the numbers from the state, and that is really how we determine from the outreach and communications perspective where we're going to focus a lot of our education on. And this, you can see why we're focusing still quite a lot of our efforts on organics and capturing that, because there's so much material there that is still being landfilled, and we think we've got a pretty good location for that.
I also wanted to add that in terms of the solid waste management fee, that is a source of revenue that we are less and less dependent on now over time. So I think we're used to be almost 30 or 40% of our revenue. Now I believe it's closer to 20%.
Correct.
And I'd offer the comment, the elephant in the room, the backdrop is we have one landfill in the state that is filling up with no viable solutions on the table in 20 years. So everything that we can keep out of that landfill is a good that might not be captured the way you do the numbers, but it is certainly a good that we could all understand.
Yes.
So Margie, you're up, and then we'll go to Barb.
Yeah, thank you, John, for this. It's very helpful and interesting and clear. And I certainly, over the long haul, I see a huge amount of improvement from vis-a-vis 1993. But even in my time on the board, I think the organics has improved quite a bit. I seem to remember, unless I'm mistaken, that it was up around 30% when I came on the board back in, 2 years ago. So getting down to 25% seems like a great improvement. Is that clean wood in part, or are we making a lot of headway on food scraps?
We're making headway on food scraps for sure, but yeah, it does involve clean wood and yard debris as well, so it does get lumped together.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say that I think the communications and outreach on the food scraps is really has, without having done a perfect study about it, but it's really improved, and I love getting all those messages about composting your food scraps. Thanks.
Thanks, Margie. Barb.
Great presentation. It was really nice and clear. So I'm on a board for a long-term recovery group. And we cover 3 towns, and we've taken down, with the help of FEMA, we have taken down homes. I mean, totally taken them down. Where does that stuff go? Is that trash or is that C&D?
Well, demolition's tough because the material coming out of these homes, or buildings that are being taken out, is often mixed, painted,
Moldy.
Moldy, an amalgamation of materials. So yeah, it is really hard to recycle that stuff. Things like shingles, it's possible to get them off the roof. Again, our facilities just aren't handling that right now. So yeah, I imagine a lot of that's ending up in the landfill.
Yeah, and I'm sure it is too. And it's not going to, so 23, 24, some of that increase could be due to disasters, floods and other disasters. And I don't think that's going to go down, unfortunately. That's why we have our long-term recovery groups. The other thing is, I do quite a bit of traveling, and I'm amazed. I bet if I traveled in Vermont and stayed at Airbnbs in Vermont, I would discover, and Jen's place is sure good, that recycling is available. But I'm amazed at the amount of places that I know they have good recycling. However, the second homes and the Airbnbs don't do it, and there's no signage, there's nothing. So I don't know if we address that second home kind of short-term rentals population at all.
Yeah, I don't know if we've actually had any specific outreach in that.
So we don't address it. We don't address short-term rentals head on. But we do have resources. I mean, it's not an easy thing to get at because it's not like you have a registration necessarily of everybody and their contact information. We do have resources with stickers and brochures and things that are available for landlords and short-term renters that they can use in their rental locations.
Yeah, I bet in Vermont, it's much better than other places I've lived.
And I will just comment, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but Vermont is really pretty good at recycling and diverting a lot of material. And anybody who's a short-term rental, if that's their practice, they are likely also helping any renters do that as well. I don't know that for a fact, but I like to think so.
One of the other things is one of the countries that we've traveled in quite a bit that does an amazing job is Portugal. So Portugal, wherever we have rented, there have been somewhere nearby, there's been recycling drop-off spots, just containers that were are like a neighborhood kind of thing. So I don't know. It's just mentioning it.
Yeah.
Mentioning shit. Thanks, Robert. Lauren.
Yeah, I have kind of an observation and a question. Observation being that I know the lumber mills are reducing in quantity across Vermont, so that could be some of our additional clean wood coming from that. Or I know like Colchester, there's tons of development happening, so also clearing of land could be our increase in clean wood. But my question is around transportation. How do we account for transportation annually? And to give you context, my question is coming from a place of I'm curious how transportation relates to the overall business environmental impact, like greenhouse gas in particular.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead, John. You take it.
Well, I don't have a very good answer for that, honestly. And are you thinking in terms of our facilities attracting traffic and driving generated trips, or are you talking about
Kind of in like any capacity, like our own transportation miles used, and then also transportation used to access the facilities.
Yeah, I can tell you that the WARN model we use to model the greenhouse gas emissions, it does have the facility to allow you to configure how far away your landfill is. So it does, to some degree, incorporate the transportation cost of moving that material to Coventry and those greenhouse gas emissions. And that sort of, provides you with a baseline upon which you offset. But it doesn't incorporate things like, pickup from, collection, companies that are actually collecting the material, and it doesn't incorporate the traffic that we might generate with our own facilities. So yeah, it's a little bit of an unknown. We could maybe take a stab at that. We do know our annual trip numbers, but
Sounds like a grad student study is what I'm thinking.
yeah, that could be good. Yeah.
That'd be better. Somebody was sharp.
Yeah, I know, like comparatively, it usually has a very large impact. So I wonder if that's another way that we can just make an impact. It's like reduce our overall transportation or provide better alternatives to folks accessing the drop-off centers or the locations. I know that came up also in the survey.
Certainly the notion of consolidated collection, something.
That's what I was gonna point to.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Because they're looking at obviously that for recycling, but also, at some point, maybe, possibly down the road. But that's one of the factors.
That was in the study is, route miles traveled. That's one of the benefits of consolidated collection is you're taking multiple companies off the road that are in the same neighborhood, and designating it to one company for, say, zone, or one company for the entire city is gonna be collecting all three streams with less trucks. You know, two at a minimum, because you can collect probably recycling and food scraps with a split body truck, and then trash with a larger truck, because ultimately, ideally, there's more recycling and compost and there's trash, but it just doesn't seem to work out that way.
Yeah, it came up
That's-
for me when we were talking last time about like how folks can bring like a truck and a trailer, and it's still, I don't exactly remember, but maybe that's still considered like residential, even if it's like kind of small commercial. So it got me thinking like about efficiency of trips, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can go down a rabbit hole with this.
Totally.
The entire facility, you know, you got
Oh,
the
yeah.
wharf, they got the windrow turner, they got the loaders, you know, and I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, you would be seeking alternative fuels or electric vehicles, which, you know, the technology is coming. It's not quite there yet. You know, we explore them in Burlington. They do have electric loaders, but you know, you can only work so many hours with them, then you have to let them charge.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, smaller scale equipment, maybe like, we have a fully electric, Zamboni at Letty Park here. We have a fully electric forklift over, at Burlington Electric and at my fleet maintenance shop. So, you know, you can try in instances, but eventually the technology will get there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I know it's full of rabbit holes, but I mostly wanted to make sure I understood, like, if we were accounting for transportation, which it sounds like we are, it's kind of modeled in the portion of the work. And yeah, just where it was.
They have routing software that can,
Yes.
you know, we have in GPS in our vehicles now, and with our recycling trucks, we can optimize their route and make more efficiencies that way, burn less fuel.
We're gonna go ahead with Betty.
Betsy.
Betsy, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Paul. This could be a dumb question, so I'll preface with that. How do they do the waste composition study? Like, does somebody stand at the edge of the landfill and kind of look down, or to take a scoop, or?
It's a scoop.
It's a scoop? Okay.
It's basically through a series of transfer stations.
Okay.
Across the state, and the state hires a company, and that is literally what they'll do. They will go to the transfer station on a certain day, and a load will come in, and they will take a section of that load,
Okay.
pull it out, spread it out,
Sort through it.
and sort through it.
And then extrapolate.
Correct.
Okay, correct. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Two questions. The CO2 equivalent, that I'm assuming is normalizing all kinds of gases using the effect of CO2 as a standard. But just going one level deeper on this, what are the gases that we're talking about? It sounds like gases produced by transportation is a factor in the model. Does this also take into consideration gases, decomposition gases coming from the landfill? What are some of the components of that CO2 measure?
Yeah, so the WAR model is a bit of a black box. It's a user-friendly, essentially, spreadsheet interface where you can plug in answers to questions they pose to you about your facilities and collection systems and how much you're diverting, et cetera. There's nothing specific to say methane. You know, it just basically rolls out a number. And so, you know, that's kind of the shortcoming of the model as it is. But it does take into consideration transportation, say your landfill itself, and it's taking into consideration, you know, the emissions associated with different types of material processing, so different types of recycling, or if you have a lot of gas, or if you, for instance, in order to sort of get at the under workings of this model, I was playing around with it just to see, oh, well, what if I reduce this material as recycling or diversion or increase another? And I found that it was very sensitive to the diversion of paper products. So that had a big impact on the output. But again, you know, kind of a model that was been crafted, the spreadsheet that was used specifically for this industry. And it's, you know, I don't fully understand all of the underpinnings of the model itself. It does also ask, now I think about it, whether you have greenhouse gas emission capture at the landfill, which we do have, and that also factors into the results. So that's kind of the best summary I think I can give.
I don't know about this particular model, but I think typical gases reported on are CO2, methane, and NOx. Dioxide.
Yep.
Those are the main ones, but I don't know obviously what specifically we're looking at.
Thank you. And can I go on with my second question or?
Go for it.
Okay. I've become confused about alternative daily cover and how that's accounted for. Because if I understood your presentation correctly, ADC is considered to be diversion, but I seem to recall from discussions several months ago here at the board that ADC counts as trash, but perhaps at a reduced fraction, like maybe 25%, because it structurally becomes part of the landfill, but it's part of the landfill, so it's still trash. So is it trash or is it diversion or is it both?
It's trash. I'm sorry if I might have misstated that in the presentation, but it is material that's deposited in the landfill, so not considered to be diverted material. I just include it in the report. It's a wild card. It goes wildly up and down every year. But you know, depends. Like when we had Burlington High School coming down, that contributed a huge amount of ABC material that was used, designated for use as ADC in the landfill. So if they don't have available ADC, I don't know, Sarah or Jen, you might be able to clarify or help me here. I'm assuming they just use soil that's on hand.
They'll use a variety of different products. It depends on, sometimes it'll depend on the type of material that's being deposited in a certain area. They may need to cover it a certain way with so they'll have a pile of soils. They don't want to use virgin soil, but they'll have a pile of contaminated soils for that use. They want to immediately cover some things like sludges, so that gets covered right away. They can use, like it's almost like a concrete mix. It's called Pozzolan. They could use a mix like that, and they would spray that over the landfill. There's a host of different applications that they'll use, and knowing that they want to use the least expensive option because the next day they're going to come over and they're going to scrape it off and start burying again. So it is just for that daily cover, just again, you know, to keep the birds out, any kind of other kind of annoying vectors, odors, keep odors down. Not really to keep moisture out, moisture's going to get in, but it's any variety of things. So they do incentivize the ADC with the price reduction because they don't want to have to buy soils. They don't want to have to buy or use Pozzolan because it's expensive, even though it does an excellent job. So that's why we also help in that manner to say, okay, if you contact the A&R and they say, yes, you can, this material we will qualify, we also provide that reduction in our solid waste management fee for that local material.
Thank you.
Rick, the 25% you're thinking of that's what we charge, I believe, with solid waste management.
Correct.
We reduced it for ADC.
Yes.
So that's what you're thinking of.
Thank you.
So I have a related question. We hear the term contaminated soils. Can you just describe that? My imagination says it's oil soaked, you know, hazard, EPA quality, you know, sort of.
Yeah, no, definitely not what we would consider hazardous waste. And again, it has to be approved by the state itself. So
a contaminated soil can be basically anything you wouldn't want to grow something in. So there's, you know, for example, there's arsenic naturally occurring in the soil. So if you're doing a big construction project and you're taking that up and it tests those come back heavy with arsenic, that could be technically be contaminated soils. So that could go as EDC, but we're not talking, as John said, as hazardous. So that would have to be managed completely separately, differently, likely would not be accepted at Comr landfill. That's why they have hazardous materials, landfill specific for that kind of stuff.
Thank you for the clarification.
And the fiber, is that like clothes and
No, so
sofas
that's
or?
paper products,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's like physical paper, so this kind of fiber,
yeah.
cardboard,
Okay,
boxes, box board, that's what the industry calls fiber.
fiber.
Clothing would
Yeah.
be textiles.
Textile, okay, that was the
Yes.
word I wanted.
Yeah.
So textiles would only be clothing, or would that be?
It's basically mostly clothing. It can be the covering to a sofa, like a cloth covering.
Okay.
If that gets separated, that would then go into textiles, but it can be
Like
sheets and towels
okay,
and anything
bedding.
that is a fabric
Okay,
nature.
thank you.
Further questions or discussion on the diversion report?
Just one question or clarification on the C and D, you know, in regard to asphalt and concrete. Does, you know, because SD Ireland just opened their own asphalt plant. So are they gonna be a recycling facility of asphalt like Whitcomb is, or?
That's a good question. I don't, Joey would need to remind me if they've applied for a permit or license as a recycler. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Whitcomb's permitted to recycle. Myers does.
They bring, cause they're on this
question.
list.
Yeah, they're licensed processors of material.
I don't know if are they a recycler, John, though, or just a processor?
Licensed processors, as far as I know.
Because they mill their own projects and bring it back to their facility.
Yeah.
And concrete. I know some of that can get pushed over a bank.
Yep.
Reality, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can grind, crush that up and grind that, you can reuse it.
Yeah, I know, that's what Ranger does.
Yep.
Actually, we use a lot of their products at the city.
Yeah, it's, I think, all reclaimed.
Reclaimed asphalt.
Yeah.
And we even use they screen their asphalt before they crush it to get a real clean product. We buy the screen product, that's all asphalt fines and gravels.
Yeah.
They're catching a lot of material over there. Okay.
There are no further questions, and I had said about now to do a brief break, but I think perhaps we could do the MRF project update, and then we're going to be going into executive session. That might be a better time for us to take a 5-minute recess. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah, for the MRF project update,
Okay.
item number 7.
Great. So as we'll recall, the Williston DRB Development Review Board did ask us to come back with a revised plan. We have submitted all the documents to the DRB. The Conservation Commission will also be reviewing the revision. The DRB meeting is October 14th, Jen, I believe it is.
Next Wednesday?
No, I think it's October.
Oh, yeah.
And then the Conservation Commission is, before that. So what the DRB asked us to do was to bring the building further out of the habitat disturbance area. We believe that we had enough of a buffer zone, but the Conservation Commission disagreed, and then the DRB agreed with the Conservation Commission. So we basically moved the building design slightly southeast and rotated it 90 degrees. So we revised that plan that had several benefits. Actually, we were able to reduce, instead of having 2 large stormwater ponds, we have 4 smaller stormwater ponds, which is helpful. We created a longer queuing space for trucks, so kind of being able to bring more vehicles further into the site, so that there's zero threat of having any trucks queuing on the road, on Redmond Road, so they will all be contained within the facility, which is perfect. And so we had to revise that. We had to revise the lighting plan slightly, but all of that is with the town. We did talk with the town planning and zoning ahead of doing that revision, so that we had some good indications that it would pass muster. They agreed. They thanked us for working so quickly on this. They promised a very speedy review internally, which they are working on right now. So that is in. All of our permits are in with the state. So those are all in the works. And the DRB decision is the last bit that we need before we can start to clear. So should the DRB, should the Conservation Commission agree that we have met their requirements and then make that recommendation to DRB, and the DRB agrees with the Conservation Commission and then issues their written approval. We should have that written approval within about 3 weeks after the meeting. So our new goal for clearing is that no later than the second full week of November. Fingers crossed for a mild winter season so that we can clear and lay the slab. Really getting the slab laid over the winter is critical. So that's the diciest piece. If the weather is not great and we have to wait till the spring, that then puts us back several months because we can't build on a shaky slab. So, but everything is, we are in the process. It's in the hands of others right now, and we are good. One piece that we did need to take on that was directly related to the delay is our equipment manufacturer, BHS, said that they could no longer store our equipment at no cost. So they've been storing it for over a year, the pieces that they had already constructed, and they hadn't charged us up to this point. And they did tell us about 2 months ago that they were going to need to start to charge us for that. Josh and Kaylee and I started looking here for options in Vermont to just be able to bring that equipment here, thinking that we could possibly store it more cost effectively. And realistically, we couldn't. So we could find a location that might be a little bit cheaper, but we would have to lease it for a minimum of 3 years. We only need it for 18 months. Most of the 3 warehouses that we talked to, they wanted 5 years. We found one that would agree with 3. We would have to assume all of the liability for all of the equipment. So as soon as we take ownership of it, literally receive it, it's ours. So if anything goes wrong, we are on the hook for replacing that equipment. So as long as BHS still has it, it's their responsibility.
Hey.
The insurance also is costly, so that is all wrapped in. And they said that they will have one or two. I think maybe Mike. There you go. Thanks. They also said that they're going to have 1 or 2 employees go out to the location every week and physically look at the equipment, grease anything that needs to be greased, make sure that it still is in the condition that it needs to be in. They would have to train our folks to do that. So unfortunately, this is a cost that is not part of the original bid. But when we ran the numbers, at this point, especially from a liability perspective, made more sense to leave it with BHS. And then when they do come to install, they will just deploy as needed. So they'll send stuff only as that installation schedule requires. And then they'll stage here and then send for the next set and stage and send for the next set. So that is an unfortunate expense. It's about $27,000 a month that was not budgeted. So I'm grateful that the numbers are coming in the way they are for the MRF Project fund, but that is a direct result of the delay.
Is there any advantage to, have you run any numbers to see what the cost difference or increase would be to pour that concrete during the winter? Because you can pour concrete.
You can, and that's what Ireland's plan is. They're proceeding as if that's going to be the.
I know they have to have heat mats.
Exactly, that's what we're trying to avoid. But they're proceeding because that is the plan, and REARC will work with them on that.
Is there a benefit in the long run to pouring it to get it? Obviously, then we can get the equipment here quicker.
Exactly. Well, really, we want to pour it as quickly as possible so that we can then start to erect the superstructure. Right. So yes, we don't want to wait for the pour. And if it comes to the fact that we need the heat tents or the mats, we will take a look at that. And my guess is it'll be worth the cost just to make sure that we can get the walls up and then get VHS in when we need them to be in. And keep that commissioning due date, which for us is about a year from now. This is when I want to be commissioning that work. Yes. Yeah. We're watching every
How much a month is the storage?
27,000. Which includes insurance and stuff. I'm not talking.
Got 3 months off of it.
Exactly. That's right.
Other questions for Sarah on the MRF project? Hearing none, then we're ready to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing real estate and legal issues. My intent would be if we enter into executive session, then take our 5-minute break as folks on Zoom still have to log off and log back on, and we can stand up and stretch our legs. But first, let's have the motion to enter into executive session.
Do we have a, yeah, do you want to read the motion there? Has it been
You got the
read?
motion.
I do have the official. Motion that the Board of the Chittenden Solid Waste District go into executive session to discuss real estate negotiations. And there was another item on this, real estate negotiations and
And pending civil litigation to which the district is a party.
is a party, where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the district, its member municipalities, and other public bodies or persons involved at a substantial disadvantage, and to permit authorized staff and other invited interested parties to be present for this session.
So move South Burlington.
Seconded Essex.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we enter executive session. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? It's unanimous. We will enter into executive session. Well, let's reconvene at, I have it at 9:36, 7:36. So let's 7:41.
Okay.
Abstentions? We're now back in public session. There was no action required for the discussions that we had in the executive session. We're now going to move on to item number 8C, which was originally listed in the agenda as being an executive session, but we determined that this should be a public session item. This deals with a quasi-judicial process review. Just to frame it for commissioners, there is a special meeting of the Board of Commissioners scheduled for noon on October 21st. The nature and the conduct of that meeting is likely to be different than what we do for the regular board meeting. And so we have our board counsel here to kind of give us some preparatory background that will help us understand how that meeting will proceed and what our role is in that meeting. So enough of a preamble, then over to Tom.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. The first place we'll start is the Vermont Constitution, which provides that government exists for the people. From that comes the notion that officers of public bodies and officials are servants of the people and are accountable to them. And using that basic premise of the Vermont Constitution, Vermont legislature adopts what's called the open meeting law. And the open meeting law requires that whenever a quorum of a public body gets together and discusses any element of the business of that public body, it has to be done in a meeting that's open to the public with proper notice given so that the public can attend and participate. And also public is given an allowance to speak on matters being brought up and discussed at that public meeting and to voice their opinion. But there are two exceptions to that open meeting law when you can discuss things in private. And these two exceptions are generally the executive session, which we've just experienced here, and when the public body, Board of Commissioners in this case, acts in a quasi-judicial capacity in a quasi-judicial proceeding. So the most common exception is the executive session. And there are two general categories in which you can go into executive session. The first one is where you make a finding that premature public knowledge will put you at a disadvantage, and that contract negotiations. If the other side knew what your bottom line was, or you were willing to give or to take, that puts you at a disadvantage. So the board made that finding when the motion was made, and that allowed you with a vote to go into the executive session. Another example of that is civil litigation, where we don't want the other side to know what the strategy is or some of the weaknesses or the strengths of a case or how you're going to proceed in that civil litigation. Other examples for that are labor relations with employees or grievances. Someone complains, I was treated poorly at the drop-off center, or I was overcharged, I want to file a complaint. You can, with motion and that finding, you can go into an executive session to discuss it. There's another category of the executive session where premature public knowledge is presumed to put you at a disadvantage. And these, as it relates to employees, there's the hiring of a public official. So you can go into executive session, for example, to discuss the hiring of an executive manager or the executive manager's contract. Or you can go into executive session when there's a disciplinary proceeding involving a public employee, or their employment would be terminated. Other types of cases where there's this presumed public knowledge would put you at a disadvantage are student records for school districts, or if there's security or emergency responses. You don't want the bad actors to know where your defense system is to stop people from breaking in, or some other that are not applicable, parole hearings and things of that nature, not applicable to the district. Those you don't need to make that finding of premature public knowledge being disadvantageous. You can just make the motion. But all of those require that motion and a vote, a majority vote in the case of the district. And in the executive session, as this motion did, you can designate who can come in, people from whom you want some information, and you can do it in private, not an open meeting, but you want to get that information. Might be a lawyer, it might be someone who's complaining, or someone who might be impacted by the topic at issue. Once you decide to leave executive session, however, any action you take has to be in that open session and on the record. So if you hear a matter, a grievance, you need to come out of the executive session, and then Robert's rules kicks in. You need a motion and a second, and then a vote on the decision of the public body as it relates to the topic at hand. And I'll get into personnel matters as it relates to that versus quasi-judicial a little bit later. So that's executive session. The second area where you can hold your deliberations as a public body and discussions in private and exclude the public is what's called a quasi-judicial proceeding. And these are either for state agencies, it's a case under the Administrative Procedure Act. For municipalities, it could be the Municipal Administrative Procedure Act, such as a zoning hearing or a DRB hearing or a tax appeal, where you present evidence, you're doing it under oath, you're able to cross-examine witnesses, you're able to challenge the evidence that the other side is producing, and the result, the decision in a quasi-judicial proceeding is subject to appeal, that you can go to a higher authority. So for the districts to go into a quasi-judicial proceeding, you have to have a case where the legal rights of one or more persons is being adjudicated. You're acting as judge and jury in this case. You're deciding the legal rights of a person. You're doing it in such a way that all parties have the opportunity to present evidence. Usually you ask, you swear or affirm that everything you provide is going to be truthful. And the results in a written decision, and that decision can be appealed to a higher authority. A good example is the district hears cases where district staff has notified a business that they're not in compliance with the district's solid waste management ordinance. They're not recycling properly, they're not separating food residuals from other materials. They're not complying with the requirements of the solid waste management ordinance. They have the right then to bring that to the executive board. The executive board is deciding that respondents' legal rights, takes testimony from both the district staff, takes testimony from the respondent, and then can go into a deliberative session and decide how to rule. And then from that, they exit that deliberative session and they eventually will submit a written order of findings. Key distinction, when you go into a quasi-judicial proceeding and you have a deliberative session, when you come out, you don't need to have a vote on the record. The written decision, as long as it becomes a public record, is the decision. And that need not be done by a vote out in open session. In the case of the solid waste management ordinance, after the executive board issues its decision, the respondent, who was alleged to have violated the waste management ordinance, can bring an appeal to the full board. And then the full board acts in that quasi-judicial proceeding and makes their determination. And the respondent again has another, by statute, appeal right to the court, environmental division of the Superior Court. So the main distinction is executive session, when you come out, you have to make a motion and make your finding on the record as part of that meeting. In the quasi-deliberative session, you don't need a motion to go into the deliberative section. You just leave, or you tell everybody else to leave. And when you issue your decision, it needs to be in writing, but you don't need to do it in a public session. You don't need to do it by motion. You just decide what the decision's going to be. The chair or the head of the public body can actually draft their findings, send it to other members of the executive board or the full board in that deliberative session. Everyone agrees to it, and then it gets written and submitted as a public record. So that's the primary, distinction. No motion is needed to go into deliberative session, and no motion or finding needs to be done in a public session. It can be done just by a written order. It gets a little tricky when you're dealing with a personnel case. So with a personnel case, you can go into executive session. There are generally three categories. One would be a grievance, just as, go into executive session to discuss a grievance. A second is if you're disciplining an employee or terminating their employee, and there's going to be an executive session to understand and hear what the wrongful conduct or the reasons for the termination. And then the third category as it relates to personnel is the hiring of a person. The hiring of a person would not be a quasi-judicial proceeding because it's not subject to appeal. That's not an appeal right then. A grievance could, if it relates to their employment and their grievance arises from an assertion that you're violating the person's rights as part of a protective class. You're violating the employment law because they're being treated differently because of a protected class: race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, ethnicity, place of birth, national origin. Those are your general protected classes. Similarly, if it's an employee that's being disciplined and being told, or they're being disciplined because the requirement is you need to be in the office 3 days a week and they're only coming in 2 days, and so you want to discipline them, but you're not terminating their employment, that disciplinary action is not typically subject to an appeal. And that's the key piece of a quasi-judicial, has to be subject to appeal to a higher authority. So if it's a mere discipline matter for an employee, you could do executive session, but it's probably not going to fit within a quasi judicial proceeding. If you're terminating their employment, that would likely fit as quasi judicial because their termination can be appealed. They can claim breach of contract. This is a termination because of on a discriminatory basis. This was a termination without due cause or without due process, and so they could bring a claim asserting that this is the decision of the board is subject to appeal. So those are, you know, the basic items as it relates to personnel matters, because it's a little bit of an unusual difference in many of those. So the real summary is for executive session, you need that motion and a vote. In many cases, you have to make a finding that premature public knowledge would put you at a disadvantage or the persons involved at a disadvantage. Only those matters identified in the motion can be discussed. So as we saw earlier, there's a motion to discuss real estate negotiations and civil litigation. So that's all that you discuss in that executive session. And any decision by the public body, by the board after that executive session has to be an open session. So as the board did earlier, you make a motion in open session to leave executive session, that gets voted on. And then whatever the action is that you're going to take as it relates to the topic discussed in executive session needs to be by a motion, a second, and a vote. Quasi-judicial, no motion is needed to go into a deliberative session. Only members of the governing body are allowed in that deliberative session. So you can invite some of the witnesses or the people that were speaking. That's an ex parte that would be unfair. So only the body itself can be in that deliberative session.
And counsel.
And counsel. And no vote is required to be made in a public session, as long as the decision is issued in writing, and that then becomes a public record.
And is it true, did I understand correctly that you have like 14 days or something to issue that written?
The open meeting law does not specify the number of days. Your solid waste management ordinance requires that it be issued within 30 days. Your personnel policy as it relates to employment, I believe, has I think it's a 15-day requirement.
Thanks for clarifying that.
So again, to reframe this, that we have a meeting that's coming up on October 21st. The nature of that meeting, or the way it's going to be conducted, hasn't been determined, but it's important to educate the full board as you go into it on understanding these issues, because we would be doing ourselves and perhaps the district and other parties disservice if we didn't really understand how to conduct ourselves and what we're about at that meeting. So we're not talking any specifics about whatever is going to come before us. Just background information.
Thomas, I have a question about, so when the body leaves the deliberative session of a quasi-judicial process, does the chair need to announce the decision or just that deliberations have ended?
They do not, the chair does not need to, at that meeting, announce the decision. They may give a notion to the parties involved, this is where we're going, but that's not required. As long as a written decision is then issued, and that becomes a public document, public record.
That's what I was really getting at.
Yes.
Any Zoom allowed for that?
To participate in the deliberative session through electronic communications, through Zoom, I believe so. As long as everybody can hear each other and everyone can speak and hear all participants.
So if we have, if it is a deliberative session, and we've heard that we do not need to render an opinion or a decision when we come out of that deliberative session. If we don't have a meeting of the minds of the body, can we continue that meeting and then to a later date, reconvene, and then come to a decision?
Establish another date for to either receive additional information or evidence
Or just to deliberate?
or to deliberate. I believe so. I believe that you can. With the quasi-judicial proceeding, there are some requirements, though, that that the information being provided would be the testimony, the person would need to swear or affirm that it's going to be true and correct, and that there is an opportunity to question the evidence submitted, present your own evidence countering what the other person has presented. So there is some formality to it, whereas in an executive session, you don't need for people to swear or affirm the information. It's a little more of an informal process in the executive session than in the quasi-judicial.
John Dorworth?
Yeah, I actually have a question. As a recovering urban planner, I used to hear a lot about the risks of ex parte contact. Can you just give an example of that and what the risks could be for the board?
An ex parte contact would be, we'll give an example. It would be a zoning board hearing where one of the parties contacts the member of the development review board and provides information outside of the formal process. So it's ex parte is only one party. The other party doesn't have an opportunity to see it in advance, doesn't have an opportunity to question it or to challenge it. The information is often provided without an affirmation or swearing that it's true and correct. And so in those types of the quasi-judicial proceedings, that's improper because it's secretive, and it could favor one party at the expense of another and take away their due process right to challenge testimony or information that's provided adverse to their legal rights.
And for the benefit of the full board, the executive board has actually conducted several of these quasi-judicial hearings dealing with it, as you cited as an example, for violations of solid waste management ordinance. Marty?
If there is a second deliberative session before coming to a decision, are there any rules about who can participate in the first and the second? In other words, if somebody cannot participate in one, can they participate in another, or vice versa?
Off the cuff, I believe if they're part of the quasi-judicial, if they're part of the deliberative session, I think they would need to be present for the testimony and the information provided for them to participate in the deliberative session.
So there's no, oh, sorry.
So if they weren't there at the first deliberative session when the information came in, I don't think that it would be fair for them to sit in on the second extended deliberative session when they didn't hear the testimony, weren't able to gauge the veracity of the witnesses or the information provided.
Okay, so there's no written record of the evidence and the testimony?
There doesn't have to be. There often is that if people are submitting information, but most of the testimony or the statements will be oral statements that will be presented.
Thank you.
Just as a clarification, if we did have two deliberative sessions, we need a quorum for both of them. So the burden would be on all of us to reappear for the second. Question, or you're thinking, Thomas? No, you're
Need a quorum.
Rick?
Thomas, you just made a statement about members of the deliberative body assessing the veracity of a witness. You also mentioned that any testimony given needs to be under oath. It sounds like as a deliberative body, we are not obligated to accept the truthfulness of a statement made under oath.
That is correct. When you're sitting as in a quasi-judicial capacity in a deliberative session, you're acting as the judge or the jury. And the jury can hear all the testimony and witnesses and people swearing and affirming, I did not do it. And they can just say, nope, don't believe you. We think you did. So yes, you don't need to, in that deliberative session, you don't need to accept as truth anything or everything that anyone said, even if it was sworn to or under an affirmation. You make that, you're acting as a judge or a jury, and you can also dismiss information that's irrelevant, that's not pertinent to the issue at hand.
At this point, have we received anything in writing about this? Did I miss it?
No,
Oh, okay.
We'll
Will there be anything in writing?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So,
But this is, again, just a discussion of process and procedures
Understood.
without any specifics.
thank you.
Ken, your hand is up.
Is there, I mean, we haven't been doing any swearing under oath or anything like that so far. Is there some anticipation we're going to start doing things like that?
If you're referring to our executive our executive board.
Or so far quasi-judicial things, yes, we haven't been
I've
swearing.
actually asked for assertion that they were being truthful in their testimony.
You ask for an assertion that they'll be truthful?
Yes, I've asked that.
I believe in the past that the chair has asked that for anyone's going to be speaking either for the district staff or for the respondent swears or affirms that the information they're providing is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge.
Oh.
So I think the chair has done that
Yes.
at the other meetings.
Great.
That concludes your information you wanted to share. Any other questions on this? I think commissioners have indicated already whether or not they'll be able to attend that meeting. So please, and it's at the middle of the day, so it's hard to make a quorum. So if you've made that commitment, please honor it. If you thought you weren't going to be able to make it, but find that you can, please do everything you can to attend.
And alternates can attend in place of a commissioner.
Correct. An alternate can stand in the place. I guess it'd be a question if we are in a deliberative session, can an alternate who is if the commissioner is present in the deliberative session, can the alternate also be present?
I believe that you're better off just those commissioners. If the commissioner of a municipality is not present, the alternate certainly can participate. But if the commissioner is present, that the alternate should not go into the deliberative session.
To be present for the
For the
public
hearing,
portion
for
of the
the public
hearing,
portion, yes, to not go into the deliberative session.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've covered this topic. We're ready to move on to item number 9, which is a remembrance of former Commissioner Doug Taff, and Sarah included a memo in our board packet. I think it would be appropriate if we could read that into the record.
I agree. So a few weeks ago, not that long ago, I did let the board know that former Commissioner Doug Taff from Heinsberg had passed away. Doug served as the Heinsberg Commissioner on CSWD's board from 2010 to 2022. Doug's ties with CSWD were well before 2010 though. CSWD's first materials recycling facility contract was held by Chittenden Recycling Services dating back to 1992, and Doug was the CFO. He also sure fondly, I remember, but attended those very, very lengthy board meetings back in the early 90s when recycling was just getting up off the ground. In his obituary, it was eloquently stated that in the 1990s, Doug reinvented himself and was lovingly referred to as the garbage man in town. He served as Executive Vice President and CFO of Chittenden Recycling Services, CEO and CFO of Vermont Waste and Recycling Management, and later as a Division Comptroller and General Manager of Casella Waste Systems. Doug's commitment to waste management and his service to the Chittenden Solid Waste District Board of Commissioners working for the public good is recognized and appreciated by the Chittenden County community, by CSWD's Board of Commissioners and CSWD's staff. And we celebrate the life and accomplishments of Doug Taff, and we want to express our admiration for his service to our community.
Thank you very well said. There are still a handful of commissioners who served with him. I don't know if you'd like to offer
I'd
any
like to just
comment.
say, when I was a chair during that period, I always could count on Doug and Lynn, always sat together, to bring the conversation back to reality in some cases. They would get crazy at times. And then they would ask a question that would help focus. They were always very sensible, reasonable, intelligent questions. And so I always appreciated his involvement. I was very sad to hear he had passed. Thank you for writing it up.
Seconded, a real gentleman.
Yes.
Appreciate the contribution, probably that exists to this day unseen, but the influence is there. We now can move on to item 10, other business. Is there any other business to bring before the Board of Commissioners this evening?
I just wanted to say thank you for making my first meeting go so well. You're very kind. I didn't know there was dinner, so thanks for dinner. What a treat.
Thank you for joining.
Motion to
Move we adjourn.
Seconds up early.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening. We're 8 minutes past the scheduled time. It was that break that we had.
Thanks, everyone.